Welcome to this module of the World Climate School course on climate change. The title today is How can we organize ourselves to avoid a climate catastrophe? We will talk about the difficulties of our societies to take the necessary action to avoid a climate catastrophe and what we can do about it. My name is Rob de Laat. I live in Brazil where I work on forest protection, reforestation and rewilding. I am a member of the Extinction Rebellion and I'm especially focusing on saving the great Amazon forests in South America. I am your teacher for today together with Hans-Jürgen Rasmussen, the founder of the World Climate School. We have known since a long time, since 1972, that we have a problem with overpopulation and with overconsumption and pollution. In 1972, a group of some of the best minds around the world called the Club of Rome published a report called The Limit to Growth, which was printed in 30 languages with 30 million copies sold around the world. The Club of Rome consisted of current and former heads of state, UN top bureaucrats, high-level politicians, scientists, economists and world business leaders from around the globe. Even before climate change was recognized as a problem, the report pointed already at the fact that a combination of fast-growing population, consumption and pollution would burden our limited planet that much that it would result in a huge crisis of human society in this decade, in the 1920s of this century. In this chart you can see how resource depletion, food production and pollution would directly affect people's lives in a drop of economic output per person and soon after a drop in life expectancy. And now we also know that the planet is heating up. The atmosphere temperatures will increase this century by between 2 and 6 degrees centigrade. Right now we are on track for the worst case scenario, also called the business as usual scenario, in which scenarios will speed past the danger limit set at 2 degrees centigrade. Currently we are at around 1.2 degrees rise and already the effects are noticeable around the world. Although no one knows for sure, we can assume that organized human civilization probably is incompatible with more than 3 degrees average rise in global temperature. So we were warned and we didn't do a lot about it. Here you see the front page of the New York Times of June 1988. And the headline says, "Global warming has begun, expert tells the Senate." On June 23rd of 1988, NASA's James Hansen gave his famous testimony to the US Congress, telling them that the planet was heating up, that the burning of fossil fuels were to blame, and that emissions reduction were necessary to stop this global heating. If not, the consequences would affect human society with more droughts, floods, sea level rise, and danger to food production. So we have known this for decades, but by and large things have deteriorated. Why? Humanity did come together to give it a try to face this global challenge. Several large global conferences and treaties have been negotiated, like the Kyoto Protocol of 1992, the Convention on Biological Diversity, the introduction of the Sustainable Development Goals in 2012, and finally the Paris Agreement from 2015 to keep the warming of the planet below 2 degrees centigrade and preferably to below 1.5 degrees through voluntary national climate plans. But none of these actions had a substantial effect on the deterioration of our planetary environment. Greenhouse gases skyrocketed, forests are depleted at an increasing rate, and the world added 70 million people per year to its population. So while we are talking the talk, we are still on the road to hell. So while we had decades to do the things that needed to be done, nothing was really done at the scale necessary. And so how do we address this situation now? Because we have come into a very dire situation, because we have let things out of hand and time is running out. One of the reasons is that those who cause the problem are not providing a solution that matches the problem. There is no global authority that can enforce solutions. Everything needs to happen on a voluntary basis. Because the solutions are complex and politically very difficult to sell, people do not listen to the science and follow the recommendations to get us out of this situation. And to feel good, people find irrational excuses to delay action, which makes the situation even worse. So the question, what needs to happen to avoid a climate catastrophe? Well, what needs to happen is in fact a transformation of the way we live, a great turnaround of the way we organize our society. Much needs to happen. But what does this mean in practice? We need to cut the burning of fossil fuels as soon as possible, for sure. But we also need a water revolution, a food revolution, and an energy revolution. We need to restore nature and our landscapes. We need to create climate smart cities and climate smart rural communities. And most of all, we need a revolution of ourselves. We need to realize that we are all together in this, and together we will swim, or together we will sink. So on the political front, a lot needs to happen. Some governments are taking the right kind of measures that are needed to face the challenge, like the Scandinavian countries, and also the current government of Pakistan, for instance, or the government of Costa Rica in Middle America. But even they do not take the full measures necessary to avoid these climate disasters. The climate crisis needs a huge, urgent and sustained response from governments around the world, and it requires sacrifices, especially from those who have a large ecological footprint, which are the rich countries, which are the wealthy people around the world. It requires, in fact, the mobilization of whole societies to face the common threat. But this necessary huge response, similar to a mobilization in times of war, can hardly be pulled off in modern societies, where politicians want to be elected every few years by the people, while they keep the support of the most powerful forces in their country, like the billionaires, the large companies, the military and financial institutions. In general, even the best of politicians face the constraint of this short-term focus, while we need to deal with the challenges that will affect the future of whole generations. So we can safely bet that the current political structures and mechanisms will not be able to take the right decisions with the right scale and the necessary urgency to deal with the combined challenges we face, of which the effects of climate change are by far the most urgent. The media are not equipped to deal with climate change either, um, as a huge challenge because of many reasons, some of which are stated in this slide. First of all, climate change as a threat is invisible, complex, and difficult to report on. Also, many of the measures that need to be taken are counter to the commercial interests of advertisers. For instance, it would be good if we ate less meat, but how does that work with advertisers who want to sell their hamburgers? The two sides of the story in journalism that is, as a principle, always works to have a balanced view has been unduly enlarging the voices of the climate deniers, despite the complete consensus that climate change is real, happening now, and will bring a catastrophe if we don't act fast and at scale. Climate deniers have also been helped by expensive PR campaigns of the fossil fuel industry, which have pumped tens of millions of dollars each year in order to sow confusion. And the point is, with these things, only the slightest of confusion will keep people inactive. So you don't need a lot of pressure for people to stay home, in fact, instead of taking action. And the effects of climate change are most acutely felt by people whose stories doesn't get reported on, because right now it's the poor and the rural people who take the first hits more and more. But closely it will creep into the cities and into the centers of power. So we need new politics that can deal with this enormous problem. How can we muster the strength to change and make such an incredible makeover of society? Maybe first of all, we need to widen our perspective and see our lives as part of the great human journey of thousands of years. We have to remember who we are, where we come from. This way we can also feel that we are part of a larger movement of life. And we need to feel both humbled and honored to be part of that great evolution of our species. The American Indians made decisions based on the effect of 7 generations in the future. So we need to see ourselves as guardian of future generations and guardians of the magnificent creation of nature, all the beauty we have been blessed with. The second principle that could drive us are the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was adopted in 1948, and the World Charter for Nature, which was unanimously adopted in the United Nations in 1982. All humans need to become responsible world citizens and proud protectors of life on Earth. Based on these principles and the principle of brother and sisterhood, maybe we are able to fully take on the sacred duty of guarding the only home we have, our beautiful living planet. Voting every now and then won't do the trick. If you really want to play a part in the great necessary change, you need to live the change day in and day out. This also means we need to involve everyone in the change, bottom up, starting with our families, our street, our neighborhoods, our villages, towns and cities. Transforming our surroundings and the way we live needs to happen at every level with the great principles of equality and deep respect for nature, for creation, for our living planet. So to start with, we need citizen assemblies to come together to grieve the loss of quality of life that we have already experienced every day with the deterioration of our habitats, of our landscapes, of our water situation, of weather, increase of heat waves and droughts. And to come together to make plans in concentric circles, starting from our homes and from our immediate environment, but based on the connection with all of life. Think global, act local. So what should be the fundamentals of this new politics? First of all, we have to listen to the science. We have to speak the truth. We shouldn't hide behind all kinds of silly stories, because this is really a big problem that is coming at us. We have to declare a climate emergency at all levels, at the level of the village, the city, the province and the state. And we need to mobilize all of society. This is a problem the size we can only meet if we are all in it together. And we have to keep in mind all the time and hold sacred the fundamental rights of nature, And we have to see it as self-evident that nature is actually carrying us, is giving us life, and therefore needs the care and the respect from us in order to keep future generations alive. We should understand that we are not owners of this earth. We are borrowing the earth from future generations who need to live there here as well and need to be happy and live lives well lived. Only if we involve everyone, we can make the great turning. And with that we mean all citizens have to come hand in hand and take up whatever challenges there are in their neighborhoods, in their lives, to increase the resilience for climate change, resilience about drought, heat, floods, and sea level rise on coastal lines. Only if we do this in community, we can find common ground and the strength to actually get us through these amazingly dangerous times. Because if society starts to break up and it's going to be everyone against everyone, then the disaster will become even much worse. Community is at the center of how we're going to get through this. And everybody should have as their most important principle to make life more beautiful and to make life more happy with every act that we do. So maybe we should just simply smile and realize that we have received the greatest gift ever given, and that is the gift of life. And we need to use it well, this beautiful gift. So central to this whole change is that citizens are involved in it and are part of what needs to happen. And that's why we are calling for citizens assemblies. And we have seen in a couple of instances that they actually gave immensely impressive results. Once a group of random but well-informed citizens have been briefed by scientists about the grave danger of climate change and related crises and what we can do about it, they are ready to act with strong measures to protect the future of the nation and the young, halting business as usual thinking that makes change so difficult with elected politicians who are caught in a system. A recent example has been the French Citizen Convention on Climate Change. Here, 150 people were randomly chosen from the French population and set together for 9 months to look at all the evidence and come together and to come with lists of measures that should be taken in order to face the challenge. It was a great experiment in radical democracy, and it was formed as part of an experiment that actually came from the Extinction Rebellion, but also early examples in Ireland. And the French President Macron said, we're going to use the output from this citizens' convention to make new legislation for climate change. Well, the outcome was staggering, largely unanimous, and huge changes were proposed to the way the French society, state, and rules operate. And huge measures were proposed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from transport to building heating and cooling. And many other measures were taken. The list was incredibly long. Later on, you'll find a link to all the proposals that were made by that convention. One of them that I personally like was that they voted to make ecocide a crime against humanity. So the killing of large stretches of nature, of natural habitat, would be a crime against nature, a crime against humanity. And Was very important also was that there was a lot of support to localize production and consumption and job creation, and to ensure that there was good health, food, and energy security for all. And a lot of measures were pointing at especially the protection of the vulnerable from the effects of climate change. So you see that once citizens are well informed, they come to much more radical conclusions than the politicians that we choose in our regular elections. So through these experiments with citizen assemblies, we found out, which we already knew, that most citizens are actually caring people who will work hard to overcome challenges and will be caring people for people around them, and also for plant life around them and animals around them. And we need to support the politicians who are doing their level best to take the necessary measures by organizing ourselves in these citizen committees everywhere. This is a citizen movement to avoid catastrophe. The enormous changes needed will not be delivered by huge structures doing giant things and huge schemes by states, but by the billions of people making climate change a priority, by billions of hearts, minds and hands, doing billions of small things to counter the threat of climate change. And we need to push with these committees the politicians to act with measures that fit the size of the problem. Because if we don't do enough, at some point the problem will get out of hand and we will no longer have any chance of avoiding a catastrophe. Climate change can only be countered by a mass movement for the protection of life on our beautiful planet. The challenge is enormous, in fact never greater, and this is a unique moment in history. We are in a climate and ecological emergency, and we do have the solution, because let's not forget it. All the solutions are already there. We know how to change it. The point is willpower. The point is coming together to decide to do it. And it is this human willpower, this human spirit, that can get us through this. And we can create a more beautiful world with this. More caring, more sharing, more equal, and more beautiful in touch with nature. And once you're on this journey, it will connect you to this human journey through the ages. You will feel the historic context in which this is happening. And you also understand that you are actually there to protect the future of generations following after us. Climate warriors are beautiful people. They are the beautiful people of this crucial time in history. Strong, confident, and committed. And together we can move mountains. In a time of emergency, new leaders are born, and you are those leaders. Let us rise together to meet this incredible challenge.